Alright, Bruchim Abayim, welcome everyone. If you didn't watch the first two videos, watch those first. But in any event, we are learning a very incredible Dvar Torah from Rabbi Nachman ben Fegel ben Breslov, Likutei Moharan, number 64, Samach Dalet. So Rabbeinu Nachman ben Fegel was explaining to us that there's two types of heresy in the world. There's one type of heresy that comes from the broken vessels, from Shviras HaKelim. And that since there's holiness in that, even though we have to stay away from it, that type of heresy is very easy to get out of. But there's a second type of heresy that comes from the empty space, from the Chalal HaPanoi, where the archetype of godliness is so withdrawn that it's invisible. And that second type of heresy is very hard to repent from. But it's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult. And he explained that in length. We already explained that in the last two videos. So now, the question is, how do you get out of that second type of heresy? So Rabbeinu says, Achda, you should know, that there is a big type of tzaddik who is the archetype of Moshe, of Moses. And that type of tzaddik specifically has to even study the words of those heresies that come, the second type of heresies that come from the empty space, even though it's impossible to answer them, like we said above, because through his study that he is looking into them, he lifts up many souls that fell and got drowned there in that second type of heresy, because these people who are perplexed and have these questions of the second type of heresy that comes from the empty space, that is the archetype of silence, because there is no intelligence that can respond to them, and there's no letters that can respond to them, as we said above, because the creation was from words, as it says in Psalm 33 verse 6, that by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth, wind of his mouth, the spirit of his mouth, all their host. And within words there is wisdom, because the general concept of speech only comes from those 5 parts of speech that exist in the linguistic aspect of how the mouth works. And through them all words are created, and through words all of creation exists. As it says, all of them were made with wisdom. Wisdom is higher than words. So again, it's that same idea that there's the Or Ein Sof that surrounds the Chalal. There's an endless light that surrounds the empty space, and the empty space surrounds all the world. So since the endless light surrounds the empty space, it also surrounds all the world. And so too, since all speech is in wisdom, but not all wisdom is in speech, so everything was created by wisdom and by speech. As it says in Psalm 104, everything was made by wisdom. And this speech that is limited by words is something that takes that higher level, which is wisdom, and brings it into letters of words. And these words, these letters, are the limitation of the wisdom. And the letters are the limitation, the border for this. But in the empty space, which surrounds all the worlds, as we said above, that is empty from everything, so to speak, as we said above. And there is no words in the empty space. And there's no intelligence in the empty space because there's no letters, as we said above. So therefore, where does this confusion come from, this perplexion come from? It comes from there, which is this concept of silence. And we see by Moses, the Talmud tells a story in Menachos Chavtes, Menachos 29, that Moses was given a vision of the future, and he saw the martyrdom of Rabbi Akiva. he saw how great Rabbi Akiva was, that Rabbi Akiva's wisdom was so high that Moses himself could not understand the wisdom of Rabbi Akiva, even though he was teaching his Torah. Whatever that means. Again, these are obviously archetypical stories that teach us archetypical mythology to teach us deeper lessons. So the story goes that Moses saw Rabbi Akiva, how great he was, and then he saw Rabbi Akiva's martyrdom. And he asked the question, this is Torah, and this is the reward, that he should be killed in such a horrific manner? And they answered him, be quiet. This thus came up in God's mind. What does it mean? It means you have to be quiet. You can't answer because you can't ask this question because there's no answer for this question. And so that's why it went up only in the mind but wasn't able to come into speech. It was only in the mind, in something that can't be explained verbally. And so it's on a higher level than speech, and therefore you have to be quiet. That's the answer to this question. Not that there's no answer, but that answer to that question comes in silence and not in speech, because it's an archetype of something that came up in the mind, and there's no speech that's able to answer it. And so therefore these questions and these perplexivities that come from the empty space, where there's no words, there's no intelligence, as we said above. So therefore, they're in the archetype of silence, and in the archetype of silence, you just have to believe and be quiet there. You just need silence, and therefore it's prohibited to enter to study the words of these heretics that are perplexed, unless you're a tzaddik on the level of Moshe. That if you're a saint who's on the level of the archetype of Moses, doesn't mean he has to be, of course, a basic fundamental dogma of Judaism is that there is no prophet greater than Moses. But the archetype of Moses in this particular parlance is the archetype of silence, and that Moses, or the tzaddik who is embracing the archetype of Moses, that concept, that archetype can go into those words, because Moses is the level of silence. It's the level that's called the Kvad Peh. He has a speech impediment in Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. That's the archetype of silence, which is above the archetype of speech. And so too, again, this is how we hold on to our faith. Like the story we were talking about earlier, about this younger man was a Gavarna for Darbaner, and what happened to him, it goes along like with what we always say about Rabbi Weinberger's example of the difference between apologetics and just love of God, that you cannot make any apologetics about. It's just there, it just is. And if your whole faith is based on apologetics in the words, there's a problem. But if there's a level that's above the words that you can't even put into words, then it's binding and it's forever. So therefore, the saint, the tzaddik, who is the archetype of Moses, the archetype of silence, is able to look into these perplexing words, because he's going there, because he understands that those words come from the world of the archetype of silence above, and he is from the archetype of silence. And so he has to look into that specifically, where other people should not study these writings and these teachings, because they come from the empty space that is so hard to be redeemed from. But because he comes from the archetype of silence, he's able to rescue and redeem and save the souls that fell into that heresy, as we said above. Alright, let's stop here and then we'll make another video. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe.